Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy podcast studio. And if you liked our opening song and our ending song, we use it. It's called Johnny's Got a Girlfriend, and it was written and recorded by the great Lee Pence, who is an awesome guitar player and an even better friend. And he is going to be talking on our podcast today about how, as a musician, you can stay healthy when you're traveling on the road. And this applies to everybody, whether you're traveling on business, whether you're traveling on pleasure. There's no reason to put your health at risk. So, Lee, welcome to our show.
How you doing? Janet and Shawn, what's going on?
I love it. So, tell us a little bit about your schedule on the road and how it's been the last couple months. I know you've been super busy, so we want to kind of put in perspective about how much time you spend on the road and how to stay healthy. So go.
Yeah, okay, the road. Well, let's define that first of all. For me, on the road is any time I leave my home environment and spend a night somewhere else because I've got to play shows, if that makes sense. So the road could be Seattle, could be Spokane, could be Montana, could be Wyoming, could be Las Vegas, could be Tacoma, because I live in the northern part of the state, right? So it's just unreasonable to try to commute from certain places after a show back to where I live. So the road to me means, that could mean 300 miles, could mean 200 miles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And even if you're not sleeping somewhere that night, still on the road, you're not necessarily eating at home. So you have to make, plans to prepare for how you're going to stay healthy while you're traveling.
Yeah, right. Well, when you're on the road, when you are traveling, everything else is a little bit more intense with regard to in terms of time. So you're always kind of looking to save time, and so that will equate to what can I grab to put in my mouth. And the reality is, it's the same thing in your home environment. If you wouldn't eat something at home, why are you eating it now? Do you think it's faster? Do you think it's better? You just didn't have time to grab anything else? I mean, you have to stop and think about that. I mean, let me put it this way. If you're doing that at home, you're really not going to go out on the road and improve things.
Yeah, it all starts.
Any better.
Yeah, you got to have the bases at home first.
Yeah, right. If you have habits at home and say to yourself, well, look, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to have I have a vitamin cocktail that I have in the morning, which does not involve alcohol, though it may have that overtone to it. But I have a vitamin cocktail that I have in the morning: blueberries, banana, protein powder, collagen, etc. And so, in order to keep my habits alive, there's a reason that I have that vitamin cocktail in the morning, and in order to keep that out of this environment when I'm in any other environment, what I've done is come up with a small Ninja mixer, right? But the point is, I have to keep that vitamin cocktail alive, whether I'm in my home environment or Las Vegas, either one. That's important. It's a habit. It doesn't mean that I would be at a gig in Montana or something and go out and grab 2 maple bars and a coffee instead of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
those habits have to be portable.
For sure.
Yeah,
Janet, what questions do you have for Lee?
Well, so really in reality, what we're saying is we're preparing. We're planning ahead, just like you would for your home environment. You plan for what you're going to bring into the house. Same thing when you're traveling. It just might look slightly different as to how it gets from point A to B, but you accommodate that with what we have available. And, I think that's the biggest mistake that people have, is that I'm on the road, so I'm just going to go to that donut place or that McDonald's drive-through or,
Well, they seek convenience, right? So if let me put it this way. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is when you play shows in some rooms, and I'll use Old Red as an example. Another example would be the $1 Million Cowboy in Jackson. Some rooms in Seattle. Part of your compensation is food and alcohol. So you're going to be tempted to grab a burger or something else under circumstances you would not be tempted under otherwise. Right. It's because of availability, because it's there and you're setting up, and it's supposed to be part of your compensation, which quite frankly, well, I won't say that it doesn't impact players, but it does. But
it probably depends on how much alcohol they drink.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. How drunk should your guitar player get? That's a thing. I'm just kidding about that. I hope you realize that. But well, let's switch over to the alcohol thing. So here you are in an environment, and quite frankly, if you have a drink, and go on stage, nobody's going to complain, right? No, I mean, what other occupation or profession could you be in where you can drink pretty much, when you want, and nothing's really going to happen? You know what I mean? If somebody came to your farm, if one of your employees walked through the door and said to you, well, I just had a morning cocktail. It really wasn't that much. How much could you put up with that? Well, you couldn't. So musicians fall into this trap, this kind of thing where alcohol becomes part of the rhythm, right? So here's how I've looked at it recently. How much of your potential do you want to realize? 100, 90, 80, 70? And if you want to reach your full potential with what you're doing, particularly anything, do you want to limit your exposure to alcohol? Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, I doubt that there's a whole lot of folks that like an IPA more than me. But how much does it get in your way? How much of your full potential do you want to realize? Because if it's only 80%, then as a musician and not an artist, somebody who's at artist level, meaning the lead singer or the entertainer, they're doing a different thing. Me, I'm coming in and I've got to be responsible for playing particular parts a particular way, in time, in tune, what I'm supposed to, right? It's a different gig. So to realize 100% of my potential, I don't really want anything in the way. I don't want 80% or 75%. And I know that if I have a beer or two, I'm going to fall down to the 80% level. So it's a trade-off. As a musician, how much, as a guitar player, you're using motor skills and you've got to be able to think your way through songs. How much of your potential do you want to realize? Are you okay with 80%? Because there's going to be people that are not okay with 80%. They want 100. And that's who you're going to compete with. So what's it going to take to get there? And in a lot of cases, my case, I have to move alcohol out of the picture to get there. And it's, it's something as being on the road or being a musician, and I suppose being anything else when you're on the road, right? You're on the road a lot and you know that. In fact, you're involved in a strenuous sport on the road. How much alcohol can you consume and still achieve 100%?
Well, I mean, the answer to that would be zero.
Right.
I mean, honestly, and it's not to say that, I might not have an occasional drink, but honestly, it definitely doesn't help you realize your performance goals. That's for sure.
Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe you know the answer to this question. How reduced are your motor skills if you drink an IPA that has that is at 7 point ABV?
Well, if you're talking about me personally, I would never ever get on a mountain bike and go down a hill after drinking any alcohol. And I've seen people do it, and it is your reactions, especially when you're downhill racing. you have milliseconds to react to something that could potentially hurt you very bad, potentially kill you. And I want 100% of my reflexes. I don't want them to impair me at all. And yes, will one drink impair my reflexes? Absolutely. Now, everybody's tolerance is a little bit different. Somebody that drinks a lot more alcohol, their tolerance would be a little bit different. But alcohol affects your CNS, your central nervous system, in any amount. So why would you potentially risk that when you're doing something that requires, intense motor skills?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my point. You're not going to perform at the 100% level. If you have to make a decision, and it may seem, it might not seem to matter, but if you're in a performance environment as a musician and you're listening closely to the other instruments around you, and let's just take something really simple. If you land on a D chord, are you going to play, or are you going to play, or are you going to play? That's going to happen in a split second.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And alcohol is not going to help that.
And it's going to matter because what you're really producing is not only show, you're producing sound along with it. And a lot of people, they don't realize why they like the sound of something. They just know they do. Right. And so that's kind of the gig, is making something that sounds really good. So you're going to have to pay attention to what's going on around you. You're an ensemble. It's proact, react. Support the singer. Many times you're going to have to pay attention to that. And if I know myself, if I have had an IPA or two, and that split second comes along, I'm just satisfied with that instead of maybe that or that or that or that. You know what I mean? I can get by with that. But this may have sounded a lot better. And it does matter. It really does matter. So, yeah, the alcohol thing, it's just you spend your environment in it. If you can just, there are plenty of videos. I've seen several lately about one particular Nashville guitar player who talks about this a lot, the quote unquote dark side of Nashville and getting caught up in the, let's grab a couple beers and play a couple guitars thing. It's really easy to get caught up in. But if you can, go ahead. If you can get to the other side and think, well, now wait a minute. What are we supposed to be doing here? Well, we're supporting the singer. We're supposed to be an ensemble, and we're supposed to deliver not only from an entertainment perspective, but we're delivering sound. Which reminds me, you remember the Luke Bryan concert?
Yes.
That you and I saw, Carolyn, my wife. So Luke Bryan came out, and he's got a red Solo cup. Of course, and he told us he was sick that night, but the show was going to go forward. And then he claimed that he had tequila in the cup. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Now, he was going to drink some tequila during the show. I don't know what was in the cup. It may be tequila, but you didn't see any of the other guys on stage drinking anything, did you?
Mm-mm.
No. I mean, they're paying attention to.
Well, unfortunately, alcohol gets wrapped around all kinds of entertainment. I will say, recreation wise, for mountain biking. And when I first got into mountain biking, I was surprised the number of guys that would go ride. And, here's a sport that's supposed to keep you healthy and supposed to keep you fit. And the first thing they would do after they'd ride is they'd start drinking beer. And it's like, that's just kind of counterproductive. It just sounds counterproductive to me.
Well, it isn't just, I don't think it's just the fact that you get wrapped up into it. That is also a problem, is it also delays the response you have to what you're going to eat, what other decisions you make throughout the evening. Because, I had 2, maybe 3 now I'm hungry. And then, so your whole diet gets thrown.
Yeah. Well, you're sitting probably at a bar, right? So what's
Right.
going to, well, you have 2 drinks, maybe 3. Now you're hungry. Well, let's see what they have on the menu. Well, you're in a bar. What do you think they have on the menu?
Exactly.
Fried food. So, yeah.
Then you get caught up in that trap of eating something you ordinarily would never eat at a time you would never eat it.
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's another thing where you can try to prevent yourself from doing that by not getting started in the first place, or don't go to places where you can indulge like that. Here's another example, kind of on topic, but switching gears a little bit, is that I know I got to tell myself, you pay for a hotel, and one of the things is they give you free breakfast. Well, that doesn't give you the right to eat two waffles and 5 pieces of bacon and yogurt and oatmeal, but you want to get your money's worth, right? It's kind of like you're talking about the compensation from the artist with the alcohol and food. Some people, and I could see myself getting caught up in, it's like, well, I got to take advantage of this because it's free. And that's part of the problem, is that we're just so overfed in America. We have so much access to food. You just have to say no. There's going to be, and it's ingrained in us, in our brains, we're wired to do that, to survive, because we think we're not going to, back 1,000 years ago, it's like, well, when are we going to have our next meal? Well, now all of us do not have to worry about when we're going to eat food again. I mean, let's face it. That's why there's an epidemic of obesity in America. So, just mind you that missing a few meals doesn't mean you're going to starve to death. There's going to be food some other time.
Yeah. Yeah, you really hit on something. The breakfast bar, just because it's there does not mean you have to go absorb everything on the menu. Right. You're going to get up. It's going to be late. You're probably, in fact, I had this experience recently. We were going to some shows in Montana. I stopped in Spokane, got there late, had to get up early in the morning, hit the road because we have a show later that night. And they have a breakfast bar, and it's actually clean, and it actually looks pretty good. And they have muffins and cereal and orange juice and all the stuff you expect to find. And so I forced myself to go through and get a cup of coffee and a banana.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I had, and it goes back to what Janet said, planning. You got to sort of plan how this is really going to work, so you finally get to the show. And what do they have? They have exactly what you'd expect. They have burgers and fries. That's going to happen. So one of the things I do as soon as I can, I go to a grocery store. As soon as I can.
Yep. So do you pack a little ice chest?
I have a small little black container bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll go in, I'll get nuts, fruit, Cheerios, things like that. So that if I want a snack, I've got it right there. And then the rule is, if I don't bring it with me, I don't eat it. Because I know where it's at, and I'll wait. If that makes sense. If I go to the gig and they're pushing, who knows, whatever. And I'm not saying that the food is necessarily bad. In fact, some of these shows I play at, the food is just great. But my standard rule, even in a rehearsal environment, is if I don't bring it, I'm probably not going to eat it.
Well,
I mean, or something with me, but if I just don't do it. Yeah, and that's kind of what it takes with me if I'm going to stay, on point, and if I follow the plan.
Well, and I think there's something to be said about that. And if you just stick to that, then you won't eat anything bad. Because the fact of the matter is that there is, we've eaten at some bars that have incredible food for sure.
Yep.
But one of the problems is that you just have if you don't set some kind of limit, you just have a tendency to overeat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's back to diet, and you can tell me, but in my particular case, diet will affect my exercise plan as well. I mean, that's going to go along with it. If I'm not trying to get to an energy diet, something that, energy management, something that makes me feel like doing something. I mean, certain foods I know I'm going to feel pretty sluggish and I'm not going to feel like doing much.
Right.
Yeah. And what I feel like doing, no matter where I'm at, if there's a gym, I'd like to get to it, even for a half an hour a day if I'm on the road. If there's not a gym, I've got a series of floor exercises I can do, but I need the energy and the ambition to do it. Right. And I know that if I stay up late, and it does, it can happen so easily. Stay up late, you have 2-3 beers, maybe you have a margarita, whatever it is you're going to have, and then there's an order of fries on top of that.
Yeah.
And you know what happens next. And so you get up next morning. Ordinarily, you get up at 6 or 7. Well, this time it's 9 or 10, and you had a bad night's sleep to top it all off because the alcohol disturbed it, and you don't really feel like doing much. So the whole package kind of goes together, right? I hope I'm making sense about that. But
Yeah. I mean, and the reality of it is that when you start putting when you have a schedule and you put those healthy habits, it's a lot easier to stay on track. For instance, I mean, if you start your morning with a gym workout, it's just a lot harder to eat. You want to start out healthy like that, and then it's harder to eat crappy the rest of the day because you started out good already.
Right. Yeah. I as you probably know, a couple years ago, I started delving into, I went to the Harvard Law School program on negotiation, which led me down the path of starting to understand more about negotiation and then management. And one of the things that I read, and it's really true, is it's much easier to follow a pattern or a habit 100% of the time than trying to follow it 99 or 98% of the time.
I agree.
You will find it to be true.
And the other thing I think that people do that kind of puts a block in it is they think it's hard to do what you're doing. I think it's hard, but I think it's harder not to follow the plan, right? I mean, At the end of the day, it's harder not to follow the plan.
Yeah, I agree. Once it becomes a habit, and once it kind of builds in and once you're comfortable with it, you start becoming uncomfortable with anything else.
Right.
It may be a thrill to break that habit, but you have to think about it in terms of exactly back. You want 100% of your potential realized, or do you just want 90, or do you just want 80? I mean, you might be happy with 80. 80 is where exactly going to be right for you. And if it's 80% of your potential, then maybe you try to slide into your good habits 80% of the time, although it's going to cost you a lot more than just 20% in terms of the bad habits. But if you're trying to realize your potential and you're trying to get somewhere, then you're going to do it 100% of the time. And it's going to get easier as you do it.
Well, and as you start feeling better, you realize break that.
Yeah.
When you break that good habit, the consequences of it. So then you got to pay for it, and then you got to start all over, and that's not, always fun. Yeah,
I'm thinking about, I know the title of the episode is, what happens to musicians when you go on the road. One of the things too is, and this to be true, you're going to be sitting sometimes for a long time.
Right.
I know both of you travel a lot. You're going to be sitting in an airport, on a plane, somewhere, in an Uber, somewhere. You're going to be sitting for a long time. And so it becomes really important to introduce some sort of exercise routine to your day. It's paramount.
And it doesn't have to be, complicated.
No.
Just body weight squats in the airport, push-ups in the airport. Sure, you might get some funny looks, but who cares? And, just those few exercises can make a huge difference. I mean, I will tell you, after sitting a long time, especially driving, you get out of the car and you start walking.
Mm-hmm.
It's worse than riding 100 miles on a bike. It's like you're sore.
Yeah.
It's like it is the worst thing for you. Movement is so important.
Yeah, it is, right? And that goes, I think you might have one too. I have a morning stretch routine that I maintain. And it's not just because of that. It's for flexibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't care where I'm at. There's probably a 10-minute stretch routine I've got that I go through, and I try to maintain that routine. And one of the reasons is because, when you're traveling a long ways and you're sitting and you really have no chance to get up unless you just like walking back and forth in the aisle of the airplane, which some people tend to object to that. But,
yeah, right.
not the least of which are the flight attendants. Sir, can we help you again?
Yeah.
I know.
I've been there though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The aisle seat, the exit row, sometimes where if you need to get off for emergencies, the longer seats, you can use
exit
that.
Row?
But yeah, you can use that space a little bit sometimes. They don't get too upset on you on that. But yeah, you kind of get the funny looks.
Yeah, which quite frankly doesn't bother me, but it's I don't know. It doesn't accomplish much. It accomplishes a little, but anyway, yeah. So for me, it's stretch routine in the morning. Try to get as much exercise as I can on the road. At least 10, 15 minutes of floor exercises. Pay particular attention to what I eat and drink. Because again, if I've got in my environment, it's easy because it's my environment, right? Now I'm going to have to take those same habits and those same traditions and anything else outside of my environment, and I'm going to have to put all of that on the road. So it doesn't mean that when I'm not here or in my home environment, it's just kind of free for all. I can do what I want and expect no result, right? There's going to be a result if I do that, if I break those habits. And it's going to take me just a little bit longer to climb back up where I was than I thought. So again, that goes back to I try to follow 100% of the time those habits. And if I want to realize 100% of my potential, instead of just 90, I'm going to have to follow them 100% of the time.
And what about sleep?
Oh, yeah. Sleep is huge, right? Well, you learn to try to sleep on a plane. I'm not too successful with that. Yeah. I can sleep in a car. I cannot sleep on a plane. And, there's going to be a strange bed. It's going to be a mattress. It could be a good one, could be a bad one,
Yeah.
But one of the things, and it sounds odd, is if I have room, and most of the time I do, I bring my own pillow. No kidding.
A pillow can make a difference when you go to a hotel that has small pillows.
Or they're too large or they're not yours or whatever.
Yeah, they're just not yours, right?
I'm glad you brought this up. Sleep is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. It goes along with the whole program, right?
Yeah, I think sleep trumps food and exercise.
You think so?
Sleep. Yeah, I do, because we will die without sleep before we'll die without food.
Yeah.
And we don't have to exercise to stay alive. So, but we got to sleep to stay alive. So I think sleep trumps them all. So
yeah.
What about electrolytes? Do you use electrolytes at all when you're hydrating?
Not a lot, but I drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of that now. It does matter.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
It does matter. Particularly matters if you start drinking alcohol. Really matters then, but it matters otherwise. It matters otherwise.
Yeah, alcohol inhibits vasopressin, which is a diuretic. So alcohol will dehydrate you. So you have to be drinking water if you're drinking any kind of alcohol.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, just kind of talking through what I'm going through in a road gig, being on the road is not that exciting. It's the shows that are exciting, but the to and from is not, it's not that.
you think about, you think about life in general. For mountain bike racing,
Yeah.
a long race for me now is 5 hours. And I do like 2 or 3 of those a year. Most of them are an hour and a half to 2 hours, but yet you train, 15 hours a week for these races, and you travel there, and it's like, you might travel a half a day to get there, and you have an hour and a half race and you're done.
Yeah. Well, how much preparation does it take you for a 2-hour race?
Well, it depends on how you define preparation, because, really, if it's your A race, you're preparing for that for 6 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's a slow build.
Oh yeah.
Is it a thing that you do every day? Is there some element of preparation that you engage in every day?
Well, you just actually talked about it. Here's the reality, and my brother and I have talked about this before. When people ask, well, how many days a week do you train? Well, honestly, if you're eating, sleeping, and moving at all, you're training. You have to consciously think about that, because everything we put in our body is going to matter how I'm going to perform in a race. So you have to think about that all the time. And I eat most every day. Sometimes I'll fast for 24 hours, but so you got to think about that. That's all part of the process. And honestly, those processes are more important than the actual physical training. Physical training, you're doing 15 hours a week. How many hours a week do you sleep? How many hours a week do you rest? And recover, because you got to understand that that's part of it too. Not just necessarily sleeping, but recovering, so you're not doing anything else that's going to throw your program off. And then how many times a day do you eat, or how many hours a day do you eat versus, how much training you actually do. So, and on a bike, you train a lot more than somebody that would be in a gym, for like strength training. But
yeah, I didn't realize. I didn't realize. Yeah.
It's no different than what you do. It's like you don't get up one morning and you might have a rehearsal for one of your bigger gigs, or at least a sound check or something like that. But you've been preparing for that for decades. Literally.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Seriously.
Right. And for particular shows and playing with particular musicians, the whole concept is that you don't learn the catalog so that you don't make a mistake. You learn the catalog so you own it.
Yeah.
It's not an issue of playing it well enough not to make a mistake. It's an issue of playing it well enough so that you own it. Nobody really knows the difference whether whether you wrote it, it's from your heart or what.
Right.
You own the material, and you own it to the point that if one night something's happening and you're playing the tune in A, and the singer the next night says, "No, I need that in G." Well, okay, right? You're going to have to be able to do it there then, and you're not going to be able to do that if you don't own the material.
No, you got to know the material. And by the way, just practicing that material is not. I get it, that's the details, but to actually be able to play that material took decades to really learn.
Yeah.
At least months and years. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, because a lot of people think, that term professional musician is very, very loosely applied. Okay. And so anytime anybody goes out and plays a local bar, all of a sudden, well, now they're a professional musician, right? But there's different tiers in the way it works. And so it's odd. You go down to a local bar, and any guitar player on the stage is going to play a G. They can all play a G chord. But when you start getting to a level where you're recording a lot and playing with a lot of different people, and it does matter exactly what you sound like, you're going to play that G chord very differently from the guy who's playing down the street at a bar.
Oh yeah,
and it's going to have to be
relative.
Precise. You're going to have to watch string separation. You're going to have to watch how you fret. It's slightly out of tune. How you control the way that it rings, the timbre, the instrument, all of it, those things will be at some point on your mind, and then on your mind enough, they're just built in. Okay, so that if you're supporting the singer and this particular line you're going to have to play to support the singer, you're going to play it on the numbers because you own the material. And the reason that you do is because you have practiced the material a lot. The reason you can practice is because you feel like practicing. So if you'd rather be out at the pool in the afternoon, having a drink and just, catching a few rays, that's one thing. But you might not be able to do that if you want to get to the next level. You might be sitting in your motel room or your hotel room with whatever practice device you have, going through that tune until you own it. And you're going to be able to play it in whatever key that somebody asks you to play, and you're going to be able to play that line so the crowd goes, oh yeah, it's that song. I mean, there are certain songs you don't even get through the first two measures and everybody's on the floor or everybody's clapping. They know it immediately. And if you're really going to play it some other way, they might not.
Yeah.
And that's the gig, is to be able to take what you're doing here, let somebody hear something, and there's a kind of collaboration and a connection between what you're doing and what they're hearing. So there's an energy that's actually happening. So in order to be able to do that, you're going to have to know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
speaking of that, tell us, since you kind of already did, Lee, tell us as we wrap this podcast up, tell us what you have a passion for.
Here's what's odd. A lot of guys get very concerned about, that's very sloppy. They get hung up with licks, and playing fast and that sort of thing. My passion is being able to play a song very precisely, and I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah.
I want to be able to play the best Mary Had a Little Lamb that you've ever heard. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely. I totally get it.
The chop or the flash aspect of music, or a lot of guys feel like it's a guitar competition, pyrotechniques and whatever. For me, it's being able to deliver a song. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a single note. It's to deliver that note with energy, joy, connection to whoever is listening to it. That's what I'm into. I'm not into flash. I'm into connection and collaboration. Because for me, that's where the energy is at.
I love it.
You're delivering something, they're delivering something back. And at that moment, quite frankly, everybody's in the band. And it's a great feeling.
So one last question. Actually, I'll have two last questions. So speaking of single notes, can you play the opening note of Hard Day's Night?
Actually,
Can anybody? Does anybody know?
No, nobody can. Well, I mean, yeah, it would take one instrument, but does this sound at all familiar? Pretty close, huh?
Maybe, but what else did they do to it?
Oh, it's this is a G7/4 that it's very suspended, but they along with right. So or
and then
maybe
probably something on the board too, or something.
Yeah, I recently played in a band that does a lot of Beatles, and we do play Hard Day's Night. And I picked that chord apart and realized it was going to take two guitars and a keyboard to get it that suspended sound. And it's it will really remind you of it. But is it real? I don't know.
I know.
You and
I
saw
will tell you.
McCartney.
I tell you, we saw it live with Paul McCartney, and he opened the show with that. And the lights came up right when he did that, and I will never forget that sound. It is ingrained in my head. It was the coolest thing.
Yeah,
and I mean, there are YouTube videos that are 40 minutes long dedicated to breaking down that note.
I know, breaking down that.
It's crazy.
Getting that sound. It is crazy. You know,
and two of the people that for sure knew what it was are dead. There's still two alive. Well, now three of them are dead because George Martin's dead.
Yeah.
So we only know that there's two, maybe George Martin's son that might know because he's a sound engineer too. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, McCartney would for sure know what it was.
Of course.
You know, but nobody really, I don't think anybody but him really knows. Although George Martin would have access to the master tapes that they had.
Yeah. Oh, I think Ringo's got to know.
Yeah, he's probably. You know,
I would think Ringo.
one of the best open guarded secrets in the world.
Right. Outside of the formula for Coke. So, Lee, if anybody has any questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So here's what you do. You go to www.leepence.net.
Hey, there it is right there.
About that. And on my website, you can email me questions. You can find out about shows that I'm playing. I've got a section called Lines, and it's just... there are different things, how to work with other musicians, how to catch a wave. Check that one out, about a career wave, how to be aware that anytime you pick up an instrument and play, somebody's listening, and it can make you or break you. A lot of people think, well, this is just a gig. No such thing.
No.
I don't care if you're playing for two people. No such thing.
Yeah. Big bands that got really big, they knew that. They play with the same kind of energy in front of 10 people as they did in front of 10,000.
Yeah, there's a story out there about ZZ Top. I won't keep you any longer, but I just got to tell you this. When they first started, they played a lot of high school gymnasiums because they weren't getting a lot of other gigs.
Yeah.
And they were playing in a high school gymnasium somewhere in Texas. And something like only one guy showed up. And they even bought him a Coke. And then they even did an encore. And that guy kept following them the rest of their career. That's how you build a fan.
Yeah. Well, Van Halen back in the 70s before they got signed, they were in the Whiskey A Go-Go, and there were like 10 people in the bar down in LA. And Ted Templeton came in. He saw this band playing like they were playing in front of 10,000 people, and he signed them to Warner Brothers, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know who's listening. You don't know who you're talking to, so. Yeah.
Well, Lee, it was a pleasure.
Hey,
thank you as always.
It was a lot of fun. I hope I had some information that was applicable, to a lot of different things. I mean, food, diet, exercise, alcohol.
Sleep. Yep.
All right.
Well, I appreciate you so much. You definitely helped realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So thank you so much, Lee.
All right. Take care.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for our midweek podcast. Thank you for listening.